Now, you wrote the book 14 years ago, and you mention, again in the foreword, that it was terrorism at the time was seen as my American compatriots largely dismissed terrorism as foreigners' boring problem. Why didn't you? Why did you see it as a good subject, ripe subject for satire?
Well, I'd been living in Northern Ireland for many years. I lived in Belfast between 1987 and 1999, and it was a very frustrating experience to see the assholes win all the time, frankly. And, you know, I was not one of those NORAID IRA supporters. I detested those people. And I detested them on both an intimate personal level and then on a larger political one. And what horrified me about my residence in Northern Ireland was the growing realization that, you know, you can decry terrorism as much as you want. It doesn't change the fact that it works. And I saw it work close up. The Brits just gave the IRA everything they wanted. And they'd say everything in, heap all kinds of opprobrium on them in public, and then, you know, go through the back door and meet with them in secret. And it was creepy. And then, you know, I see it today. It hasn't changed. This is one of the reasons that I thought I would bring this book out now, is that I'm still seeing the worst of behaviors pay off in spades. Just hop an airplane, all right? Every time you lose another hour of your life in that security queue, terrorism wins. Every time you have to take off your shoes, terrorism wins. You know, we like to think, oh, we've got this great security, you know, we're beating them. But no, they've beaten us. They have destroyed air travel in our lifetime. It is a nightmare. Do you remember when it used to be fun to fly? My God. And when we distort our lives that much, and even sometimes, you know, distort how we feel, what we think, become suspicious of Muslims on the street and hostile, that's actually been done to us to a degree. That's a warping of our feelings, and it's a distortion. I am very frustrated by this, but I wrote op-eds about this issue until I was blue in the face, and nobody paid any attention. And I thought, time to take a different tack. And this time, I did it. I went at the same subject with a lighter touch. I took it out of Northern Ireland. This does not take place in Northern Ireland. I've invented a place. I drew a peninsula onto Portugal that doesn't exist. That's why there's a map at the beginning. And I made up a whole set of politics, which was fun. And it ends up also being rather prescient because it's all to do with Muslim immigration. And it's, I confess, yes, it is a funny book. And I have got it in the neck recently for publishing a funny book about terrorism.
Well, let's talk about that. Was there a sense of too soon about that? Is there a sense that one cannot laugh at terrorism, which is another way it becomes we're a hostage to it?
Well, I believe that we're in danger of being hostage to our own humorlessness. The illusion we are both making is to a Michiko Kakutani review in the New York Times last week, which was outraged by this novel, outraged. I mean, she didn't think that it was a bad book as in crummily written. She thought it was evil, really. And I think the idea was that you just can't make light of this stuff. It is too serious. And I'm starting to go evangelical on this point. I think we need to take our sense of humor back. I think that's another, I was talking about these distortions that we're suffering. which are interior as well as to do with what happens when we go to the airport. One of them is this somberness, this, ooh, that's too serious, we can't joke about that. I believe that reasserting our sense of humor is a kind of taking back of our world and our way of doing things and our way of thinking, and it's very important. It's an assertion of life, and it also is a fantastically good weapon against terrorists themselves, because they can't bear to be laughed at.
Now, I'm curious, what was it like for you going back to look at that book now, when you were republishing it? You're 14 years on as a novelist. How did you feel looking at that book? Did you feel that you wanted to change anything, or you didn't touch it, my understanding is?
I did tighten it up, and it also made me think that I should put every book I write in the closet for 15 years. It's so much easier to edit. I didn't change the substance of it, partly because I am very upfront about when I finish this book, and that's not just because I'm so compulsively honest. I want credit. I was way ahead of the curve on this issue. I was writing about this stuff before anybody cared, and it's like, me? But I don't think that it should have been changed substantively in a way that inserted little observations that I could only make now after 9/11. If I'm going to want to get credit for being prescient, then I couldn't insert things after the fact. And I just thought that was important.
It's interesting, in your book, Post-Birthday World, you refer to 9/11. It's framed a bit around 9/11 at the end of the novel. And you talk about New York, again, this is something that nobody else says, but you talked about 9/11 snobbery in New York, that there's a sense of ownership of 9/11, and there's sort of this hierarchy of where were you? Were you uptown? Were you downtown?
That's right.
Did you watch it out? Did you see it on TV? Were you actually witnessing it? And I can't help but think that observation might still hold true now.
Yeah, there was a sense in that review, the Kakutani review, of a pulling of rank, and it was like, you can't joke about that, and I'm a New Yorker, and this is in the New York Times, and I have the moral right to tell you that you cannot make jokes about that, because this is my subject, and this is our little subject, and stay away from it. And I wanted to pull rank right back. And I wanted to say, okay, honey, I was in New York on 9/11 too. And besides which, I've seen a lot more terrorism than you ever have, right? Because I lived in Belfast for 12 years. It's not very attractive, is it?
Okay, well, we're coming to the end. I could ask you questions for another 5 hours. I will kick off the...
Be over-prepared. Look at how long this is.
I know. I want to ask you, actually, you alluded to this, and that is the movie of Kevin. And what was that transformation like? How did you feel about seeing it transferred to the screen? And what was your involvement in the process?
I was not involved at all. And the good thing about that is it gave me plausible deniability. That's a fancy expression for, if it sucks, it's not my fault. And I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was a damn good film. Tilda is fantastic. I would say it errs a little bit on the kid is evil side of the equation. I expected that, because I think that for any movie to have captured some of the moral ambivalence of the book would have been very difficult. And the one unfortunate thing about that is that it meant that the film in its own unusual way, still falls into a category of films about evil kids. I mean, we have had them before. But it is strikingly filmed, it is very well acted, and it's especially good when it uses my dialogue.
Well, one element of the film that I think was particularly theatrical was the use of the crossbow as an instrument.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered, and my last question before I turn it over to the audience, why
they didn't use a crossbow.
They didn't? What were they using?
Didn't. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things that annoyed me the first time I saw the film.
Oh, good. Let's talk about that then.
Because, this was hilarious. And he uses a bow and arrow. And I asked both the scriptwriter and the director, she did the script, I said, well, why did you decide not to use a crossbow? Because, a crossbow is a great deal more deadly.
Did he not graduate to the crossbow?
No. No crossbow in that film. It's a bow and arrow. And I used a crossbow in the book on purpose because I thought it was more credible, because it's so much more vicious and so much more accurate. And the director said, well, no father would ever buy his kid a crossbow. And I said, this is the United States. We buy them automatic weapons. What do you mean they wouldn't buy a crossbow? I just thought that was hilarious. She's Scottish.
Okay, that says it all. So, any questions? Please, the mic is right there. If not, I will. I've got lots. Is there someone?
Hi.
Hi.
I'd like to know what novels you like to read and what novelists you like.
I'm a huge Edith Wharton fan. I really love Age of Innocence and House of Mirth. I'm also a big Richard Yates fan, and I've been delighted for his work to get a little more attention now that Revolutionary Road has been made into a film. Also a very good film. I like Richard Ford. I like Ian McEwan, Margaret Forster. I'm doing pretty well because usually when anybody asks me what writers I like, I can't think of any. But I'm certainly not one of those, to me, very peculiar novelists who claim that they don't read novels because they don't want to be contaminated. I think that if you don't read novels, you have absolutely no business writing them. So the one thing that embarrasses me a little bit is that when I remember the writers that I especially like, I almost always think of men, and that bothers me. And I can't tell whether I mostly like male writers or I've been brainwashed.
You recently told, I think it was, I can't remember, The Independent. Oh, is there someone else? I'm sorry.
Hi, Anne. I'm a huge fan of yours. I love your work, and it's actually thanks to Anne that I've discovered so much about your writing. And I think I have read almost all your books also.
Wow.
So I couldn't believe this new book that you've written was so prescient. I mean, given that it was written in 1998, it just blew my mind that you were so far ahead of the curve, as you mentioned. And I think that...
that's the reaction I wanted.
Oh. Incredible. And
Thank you.
I kind of wondered what your thermograph was thinking about now. What's getting your attention? Because a lot of things have come to light in the interim, in the 14 years since we've been exposed to all these really corrupt and horrible influences and conspiracy theories. And where do you turn now? You seem pretty optimistic, actually. I'm kind of surprised.
Well, as for the many things that I'm concerned about, one of the reasons I'm optimistic is I'm going to die soon. Most of the big problems, they're not going to be my problems. Where do I start? I get exercised about immigration. I get exercised about tax policy, especially as it affects me. I am, of course, very upset with the whole banking scandal. I mean, we've been robbed. And we haven't changed the law appreciably, and none of these people have been punished. They actually took the money and got away with it. I can't believe it. They took away real money, and then they left us with fake money. You know, it turns out that all these scams, you know, aren't real. And the truth is, I'm not convinced this whole crisis, this banking crisis, is over. All that rot is still on the books. All the funny money is still on the books, that bad debt. So the bankers took the real money, our money, and bought houses and boats and everything. And they still have them. And they're still, you know, in their boats. I can't believe it. So, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that in fiction. There have been people who've taken it on, and good for them. But one of the hard things about being more successful is that there's not enough wrong with my life on a personal level. And that's why I end up getting really addicted to news and other people's stories, because I think I have some craving to be upset. Next.
Hi. I teach literature at an all-boys high school, and against my chair's advice, I taught Kevin this year to a room full of 16-year-old boys. They
Well, how
loved
did
it,
that go?
by the way. They loved it. And I told them I was coming tonight and promised I would ask a question, even though I'm clearly very nervous. And their consensus was that Kevin was just as much about love as it was about hate, and they wanted me to ask if you agreed with their consensus.
Well, they're the flip side, obviously. Hatred is totally different from dislike or disinterest. Hatred is a passion. And you can tell in that relationship between the mother and son that they are not just fighting each other, but they're fighting themselves. They're fighting their own feelings for each other. And in some ways, when you hate someone, there's hope, because it's passion. It's indifference you can't fight. But because they start out with that antagonism, there's obviously tension and power and energy in that relationship. And that means there's hope for it. And that's what you discover at the end. And what I would like you to tell your students when you go back to them, that was a very, very good question.
I will. Thank you.